There is a specific kind of terror that comes with the snow. It is beautiful, yes, but it is also a blank page. It records everything. It hides nothing. If a stranger walks up to your house in the middle of the night, the snow will tell you. It will show you where they came from. It will show you where they stood, watching you through the glass. And it should show you where they left. But what if the snow tells you a story that makes no sense? Imagine you are a farmer, a hard man living in a hard time. You wake up one morning to find a set of fresh footprints leading out of the dense, dark forest, marching across the frozen fields and stopping right at your front door. You look for the return tracks. You look for the footsteps leading away from your home, back into the safety of the woods. But there are none. The tracks lead in. They do not lead out. This is not a ghost story. This is a forensic fact from one of the most disturbing unsolved crimes in European history. The year is 1922. The place is a lonely farmstead in Germany called Hinterkaifeck. And the question that haunts this case is not just who killed them, but how long did he live with the bodies? Welcome to the Hinterkaifeck murders. To understand the horror of Hinterkaifeck, you must first understand the silence. The farm was situated about 70 kilometers north of Munich, but it might as well have been on another planet. It was hidden behind a forest known as the Hexenholz, the Witch's Wood. In 1922, Germany was a broken nation. The First World War had ended in defeat. Inflation was rampant. People were starving, desperate, and hardened. Living at the farm was the Gruber family. At the head was Andreas Gruber, a 63-year-old patriarch. He was not a kind man. The locals in the nearby village of Kaifeck disliked him intensely. He was known to be a tyrant, wealthy but stingy, violent, and followed by dark whispers. Rumors swirled through the village that Andreas was involved in an incestuous relationship with his own daughter, Victoria Gabriel. Victoria was a widow, her husband having died in the trenches of the Great War. She lived at the farm with her 2 children, 7-year-old Cecilia and little Josef, a toddler of just 2 years old. Completing the household was Andreas's wife, also named Cecilia, a woman beaten down by years of living under her husband's iron fist. It was a house of secrets, a fortress of solitude. They kept to themselves, and the villagers were happy to leave them alone. But in the winter of 1922, the isolation shifted from peaceful to predatory. It began with the maid, the family's previous maid, a woman named Crescens, had fled the farm 6 months earlier. When asked why she left a good-paying job, her eyes would widen with genuine fear. She told the villagers that the house was haunted. She spoke of hearing footsteps in the attic when no one was up there. She spoke of a feeling, a heavy, oppressive sensation of being watched from the shadows. She refused to spend another night under that roof. Andreas Gruber laughed it off. He was a man of the earth, not of spirits. He dismissed her as hysterical. But as March dragged on and the snow deepened, Andreas himself began to notice things that he could not explain. First, it was the keys. A set of house keys vanished from his desk. They were never found. Then, a newspaper appeared in the kitchen. It was a Munich daily paper, but neither Andreas nor the postman had brought it. No one in the area subscribed to it. It was as if someone had been sitting at his table, reading the news while the family slept. And then, the scratches. Andreas told a neighbor that he heard strange noises coming from the attic at night. Footsteps, creaking boards, the sound of something dragging. He took his shotgun and searched the attic. He found nothing. No tramps, no rats. Just a cold, dark emptiness under the rafters. But he missed one detail: the roof tiles. Someone had moved the tiles to create a viewing hole, a vantage point that looked directly down onto the family's living quarters. The predator was already inside. He was living above their heads, watching them eat, watching them argue, watching them sleep. March 31st, 1922, a Friday. Fate has a cruel sense of timing. On this day, a new maid arrived at the farm. Her name was Maria Baumgartner. She was 44 years old, a hard-working woman looking for a fresh start. She arrived at Hinterkaifeck in the afternoon. She unpacked her bags. She likely met the children, perhaps cleaned the kitchen. She had been at the farm for less than 4 hours. She would never leave. As evening fell, a strange ritual began. We do not know exactly how it happened, but forensic reconstruction paints a chilling picture. One by one, the family members were lured from the warmth of the farmhouse, across the snowy courtyard, and into the barn. Why did they go? Did they hear a noise? Did someone call out to them? Or was it something more mundane, like a loose cow? First, it was the old couple, Andreas and his wife, Cecilia. They walked into the darkness of the barn. Waiting in the shadows, behind the door, was a figure holding a mattock, a heavy farming tool, similar to a pickaxe, used for breaking hard earth. The violence was efficient, brutal, silent. One blow to the head, then another. The killer stacked their bodies, one on top of the other, covering them with hay, like discarding rubbish. Next came the daughter, Victoria. Then the 7-year-old granddaughter, Cecilia. The child must have seen her grandparents lying there. She must have opened her mouth to scream, but the mattock fell before the sound could escape. 4 bodies, piled in the barn. But the killer was not done. He walked back across the courtyard, the snow crunching under his boots. He entered the house. The house was quiet now. He walked into the maid's room. Maria Baumgartner was unpacking her bedsheets. She never saw him coming. She died in her bedroom, her first and last night at Hinterkaifeck. And finally, the monster moved to the bedroom of little Josef. The 2-year-old boy was sleeping in his cot. He was the only innocent soul in a house of sins. The killer stood over the crib, and with a force that defies comprehension, he ended the family line. If the story ended there, it would be a tragedy. But what happened next turns this crime into a psychological nightmare. The family was dead. 6 corpses lay cooling in the Bavarian winter. Logic dictates that the killer should flee. He should run back into the forest, put as much distance as possible between himself and the carnage. But he didn't run. He stayed. For 3 days after the murders, the neighbors saw smoke rising from the chimney of Hinterkaifeck. Someone was keeping the fire going. Someone was cooking meals in the kitchen, eating the family's food, perhaps sitting in Andreas Gruber's chair. Even more disturbing, the cattle were fed. The killer went out to the barn, the same barn where the 4 bodies were rotting under the hay, and milked the cows. He fed the livestock. He maintained the farm. The family dog, a Spitz, was found tied up near the barn. It was barking frantically. The killer eventually untied it, and the dog was found inside the house, alive and fed. The killer lived alongside the dead. He slept in their beds. He lived their life. Was he waiting for someone else? Or did he simply feel at home? It wasn't until April 4th, 4 days later, that neighbors became suspicious. The young Cecilia had missed school. No one had seen the family at church. A search party was formed, led by a neighbor, Lorenz Schlittenbauer. They broke into the barn. In the dim light, they saw what looked like a pile of rags covered in hay. When they pulled the hay back, the true horror of Hinterkaifeck was revealed. The autopsy revealed one detail that is perhaps the most heartbreaking of all. While the adults and a toddler likely died instantly, young Cecilia, the 7-year-old girl, did not. She had survived the initial blow. She lay in the cold hay next to the bodies of her parents and grandparents for hours. In her agony and terror, she had torn clumps of hair from her own head. She died alone, in the dark, listening to the killer walking around the house, waiting for a help that never came. The investigation was a disaster. The police, overwhelmed and inexperienced, allowed crowds of people to walk through the crime scene. Evidence was trampled. They suspected robbery, but a large amount of money was found in the house, untouched. They suspected revenge. Andreas Gruber had many enemies. They suspected Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the neighbor who led the search party. It was rumored he was the true father of baby Josef. He seemed to know the bodies were in the barn before anyone else. But nothing could be proven. In a final, macabre twist, the police decapitated the 6 victims. They sent the skulls to Munich to be examined by clairvoyants in a desperate attempt to find the killer. The skulls were never returned. They were lost during the chaos of World War II. The family was buried headless. A year later, the neighbors tore the farm down. They wanted to erase the evil from the earth. But while tearing down the attic, they found a hidden space under the floorboards. Inside, they found old newspapers, bedding, and food wrappers. The proof was undeniable. The killer hadn't just broken in that night. He had been living there. He had been the ghost in the attic for weeks, or maybe months. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved to this day. We will never know who walked out of the forest that night. We will never know why he did it. And we will never know where he went. The footprints leading into the house were real, but the man who made them became a ghost. This story terrifies us not because of the gore, but because of the intimacy. We lock our doors to keep the danger out, but at Hinterkaifeck, the danger was already inside. It was listening to them breathe. It was waiting for the right moment. The killer displayed a level of psychological detachment that is almost inhuman. To eat, to sleep, to tend to the animals, all while surrounded by the destruction he caused, implies a mind that does not operate like ours. Now, I want to ask you a question that might keep you awake tonight. The killer lived in the crawl space, watching the family for days before he struck. If someone was living in your attic right now, quietly, carefully, how long would it take for you to find them? The world is full of houses with secrets. Have you ever found something in your home that didn't belong to you? A misplaced object? A sound you couldn't explain? Or perhaps you know of a local legend, A true crime from your hometown that the world has forgotten. Share your stories in the comments below. We read every single one, because the next story we tell could be yours. If you have the courage to explore more of the darkest chapters of European history, subscribe and turn on notifications. Until then, check your attic. Good night.